Taco Trish Show. It's a Taco Trish Show. Let's talk about it.
Guys, it's me, Trish. Oh, my hair looks beautiful as always. Here with an update for you. As many of you know, because some of you follow me on my social media, and I posted this on Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. We just lost my mamaw on January 18th, and I want to give a huge thank you to those of you who prayed for me and my family, who prayed for mamaw, who donated to the GoFundMe. That was crazy, and I appreciate, I had people saying, oh, I'm sorry I couldn't give more, but please do not be sorry. Even if you shared that link, even if you prayed for me and my mamaw and my family, that's huge. We appreciate all that. You are helping us by doing any of those things. So I really hate asking for help. I hate asking for money, especially. So that was a little struggle for me, but, it was for her, not for me. So if you're like, what are you talking about? So, Mama passed away, and her funeral was very expensive, and we almost couldn't even have a funeral because we had to have a $3,000 down payment before they would even talk about burying her, before they would even get the service started, any of that. So that was very stressful, and it fell into mine and my cousin Crystal's and my Aunt Gail's lap. Like, we were mostly responsible, I felt like, or that's how I was made to feel. Now, my stepmom, she definitely helped us a lot with that, and then my dad and then his sister Tina, they all, started helping. But at the very beginning, I felt like there was so much pressure put onto my cousin Crystal and I. It was hard on my family. My family did not deal with this loss very well at all. I, however, was different, and I'll explain why. Mama was my very best friend. For years, she took care of me. She practically raised me because my parents were very young when they had me. My mom was 16. My dad was 23. Yeah, I know. He was a little too old to be dating my mom. Shame on him for that. But I wouldn't be here if he didn't, so. Oh well, what are you gonna do? So Mama was my dad's mother. And all through growing up, we lived next door to her. When I no longer lived by her, I would still go see her pretty regularly. Just to give you an example, when I was in college, especially, I would call Mama on my way to work. I worked at Wendy's. I would call her in the morning on my way there because I was an opener. And then I would call her on my break, or sometimes I'd even be still talking to her while I worked and made salads and things, and as long as the manager didn't get after me. So we talked a lot, and we would talk on my break. And then I would call her on my way home from work. I would say, hey, I'm going to school, or hey, I'm on my way over right now, because that's how much me and Mama talked. I mean, we hung out daily. And then in 2010, as a lot of you know, she got diagnosed with dementia. Mama was starting to progress a lot, especially over the last year. I saw a pretty big change in her, especially moving home. I was around her a lot more, and I noticed there was a lot of times she wouldn't even talk. She would get to the point where, like, she would just sleep all the time, and that really upset me because, it was already hard because she would be confused and things like that. But then she got to where she wouldn't even hardly talk. She got to where she wouldn't even hardly eat, wouldn't drink. Like, you had to, remind her, like, Mama, you have to eat, you have to drink, that sort of thing. So she was progressing quite a bit. One weekend, which was really recent, right before she passed away, I was like, I can take her to the hospital because she just was acting really weird. And she kept, like, spitting out all her food, spitting out all her drink, and saying she was throwing up when she really wasn't throwing up. She was just spitting it out. It's like, sometimes people with dementia, they forget how to eat because they progress so far along. So that was really upsetting for me because I thought, oh my gosh, she's already to that stage. The next day, which was like really late Sunday night, like 12 o'clock, so technically Monday, I had a phone call that night that she was going by an emergency squad to the hospital. And I was asked to come pick up my cousin. We followed the emergency squad because they had her in there a while just testing her vitals and checking everything. So we got to the hospital. She was severely dehydrated. She had all these tests ran, And I was expecting to maybe be there several hours to get her hydrated again. You know, this was mostly due to the fact that she wouldn't drink anything. Even if we tried to make her, like, she just would spit it out. And she's just very dehydrated. Her blood pressure ended up being super low, which was a bad sign. But I guess in my mind, I just thought, okay, this is going to be one of those things where we might be here 24 hours and then we're going to go home. Because that's kind of what always happened. And this time was different. The doctor came in and he said, we need to do an emergency surgery. Your grandma's very sick. She had a ulcer, or we believe she had an ulcer rupture in her stomach, and that sent infection throughout her entire body. And it's spreading quick, so we have to get in there. And they said, you know, if we don't do this surgery, she will die. But even if we do this surgery, she's still likely to die anyway because of this infection is so bad and because she's so weak. So that was very scary. And, you know, of course I immediately said, we want the emergency surgery. I didn't so much consult my family. I called and told them, like, hey, she's having the surgery. Like, I wasn't going to argue with them because my family's the type of people, they don't like doctors. They don't like going to the hospital. They're the type of people that will argue with you and say, no, let's not do surgery. But I'm like, no, he said she's going to die anyway, so we're taking the risk. But, like, I wasn't going to even argue with that. But my family agreed anyhow, so that was not an argument. But later on, I'll tell you more. So she did really well with the surgery. However, it did take longer than they expected because they got 2 liters out of her of fluid that was infection. So they put tubes in her that would actually drain more infection out of her because they didn't have time to get all the infection. It was almost impossible because it had went through her entire body. So this is called being septic. So this is what did this to her. It wasn't so much her dementia, the way I understand it, was just that, you know, she had infection throughout her entire body. So at first she was doing really well. She was immediately taken to ICU though. She was put on her ventilator. However, she was out breathing with the ventilator and all her organs seemed fine. Her blood pressure was a little low, but they got it back up. That Monday, I went in with my cousin Ethan and we were talking to her. She wasn't responding because she was out of it. And I was just letting her know we was there and that she did really good with the surgery. All of a sudden, some nurses came in and they said, we need you to step out. And that kind of freaked me out. So I thought they meant like just step out of the room. I thought maybe they were just going to change some things. But then when they said you need to actually step out in the waiting room, out of ICU, that freaked me out. And I said, okay. And as I was walking away, I heard the nurse scream, "We've got a code blue." Well, obviously I don't know what that means because I don't work at a hospital. But I looked on the machine as I was walking out and she had flatlined on her oxygen. So that's what had happened. She had no oxygen. So that really had me upset, me and my cousin. And I just knew she was dying. And they took us to a room. The doctor came back eventually and said, "We want to talk to you about discontinuing care." And I said, well, I'm not allowed to make that decision, you know. And he said, well, her heart has stopped for over 20 minutes. And I freaked out crying because I knew what that meant. Typically, within 6 to 12 minutes, they say you become brain dead if you've had no oxygen to your brain. And she has had no oxygen to her brain at that point because her heart was not beating. And that just, oh my gosh. I can't describe how bad I felt. But now I'm starting to get emotional, like replaying all that. Because that was scary. That was very, very scary. They ended up actually getting her back. Her heart was beating again. But they said, we need to talk to you about maybe doing a DNR, do not resuscitate, because she is so sick and because she's so weak and her heart is likely to stop again. So at first my family was like, oh no. And I mean, I got very upset with my family and I said, I am almost 100% positive that she would not want to live like this. She's not happy anyway. You know, on her good days having dementia, she would tell me she wanted to go home and be with her dad and God. I mean, she said that. So I knew she was not happy. And, you know, she was always a religious lady. She believed in heaven. She wanted to be in heaven. So I felt like we were going against what God wants at this point, and it really had me upset. And my family had a very hard time with this decision. Finally, we did all decide on the DNR. And she would have moments where she was doing really well, and then she had moments where she was doing really bad. My biggest concern was that she was suffering, that she was in a lot of pain. And I asked the doctor this, and he said, I don't believe she can feel anything because we believe she's brain dead. So her brain's not working. And I even talked to the nurse. She went over everything with me, showed me her eyes not responding to the light that you see on like the movies and shows with the medical where they're checking their eyes. That was actually kind of scary. Her pupils were so, they call it popped. It looked 3D almost, like I've never seen someone's pupils that large in my life. And it was kind of like she was in shock. And that was kind of creepy. Mamaw also, when they resuscitated her, she got a blood clot in her right hand. They could not treat her for that. How they treat that is with blood thinners, but because she had that major surgery, she would have bled out had they given her blood thinners. So then she had no oxygen going to her arm. She had no blood flow going to her right arm, so it turned purple. And if she did survive, which was a 1% chance, they literally said she had 1% chance of survival, they would have to amputate her arm. And her odds just kept getting worse and worse. Her ribs was broken because they did CPR when they resuscitated her. Her both lungs collapsed at different times, so she had stents in both of those. She was on she just had tubes all over her. It was really awful to see that. But I stayed in the room with her most of the time. I just didn't want her to be by herself because I knew she was going to die. And I just didn't want her to die alone, you know? Like, I didn't want to watch her die, but not going to leave her in there by herself, you know? My family was really freaked out about it, and they didn't want to go in there too much. But my cousin Crystal, she did stay in there a lot, too. And I'd say, please stay in here with Mamaw. If you're going to leave, please call me, come get me, whatever. Because she's not dying alone. And I thank God that I was there when she went, because I know she didn't die alone. I was there the first time she died because she went into cardiac arrest when I was in the room. That's when she coded. And then later on Wednesday, they came and told us it wasn't going to be long. And again, she had all these machines. She had the pressors, she had the life support, everything was keeping her alive. But her body fought against it and started to shut down on its own. And she started having swelling due to her kidneys no longer functioning properly. She wasn't urinating enough, so the swelling first went to her face and then to her eyes. When she died, her eyes was starting to open, not because she was opening them, but because there was so much swelling where water, all the fluid had went there because it had nowhere else to go. Then her hands were also starting to swell. You know, I asked them, I want to be in the room when she goes. I don't want her to be alone, and they said that's perfectly fine. So I sat there and I held her hand, and I was in there for hours. All those days I was in there for hours just waiting. And I would just pray to God by myself. I wouldn't do it around her because I didn't want her to hear and I didn't want her to be scared. They kept telling me she was likely not to hear me, but I still talked to her anyway, just in case she was there to hear me. And the day after she went into cardiac arrest, I was talking to her about different things, and I said, Mamaw, you know, if you want to go, you can. We'll be fine. I want you to be happy. All of a sudden, a little while later, you know, I was holding her hand, and it felt like she kind of gently pressed it. I really felt like at that moment she heard me. Whether she was there in spirit or whether she was in her body, she knew I was there. And that made me happy that she knew, and I started crying, and I was like, I'm so glad, you know, I'm here. And all of a sudden, I believe in spirits, so some of you who don't might be like, oh my God, but sometimes I feel like I can feel my papaw's presence, who passed away a few years ago, and I always smell cigarettes when I feel his presence. And I smelled cigarettes right after she had done that. And I knew he was coming to take her. And I smelled such strong cigarettes. And Mamaw had been cleaned up, so she smokes. She did smoke, and she didn't smell like cigarettes because they cleaned her up so much. And no one was smoking in ICU, obviously. And I don't smoke, so there's no other, there's no explanation for smelling cigarette smoke all of a sudden. And that's what I believe. You can argue with me, but that's what I believe in my heart happened. I believe he came there. But I let her know I was okay with it and that I would help my family the best I could. So I sat there and waited while her heart stopped beating, because we told him to discontinue the pressors, which keeps your organs functioning from my understanding. I'm not real sure. But we never took her off the ventilator. But I sat there and I held her hand. We watched as her heart went from like almost 100%, like it was a strong heart, down to when she died it said 0. So that was really dramatic to see that, but it's like I couldn't help but be happy when she went. Like, I don't even know, I might have almost giggled. I know I smiled, and I felt like people probably thought I was insane. But I was just so happy for my mama that she was no longer in pain, that she was no longer hurting, that she was no longer confused or upset, that now she's with God, she's with Jesus, she's with her daddy, with Papa, with her mommy. Like, I was just so happy for her. And I've been so happy for her that I can hardly be sad about it. I recently started going to church, actually the beginning of the year. I mean, I was so happy to be there. So I've been going to church for this past month of January and plan to continue to go because I like it so much. Really nice church. But anyway, I believe that that was God's way of talking to me. That way he could prepare me for this, because I would not have done well with this without him, for sure. Because when I would go to that hospital, I had such bad anxiety. I would be in a panic, having a panic attack, and be crying, and I would just say, God, please give me strength to get through this. Please give me peace in my heart, and just help me. Help me be strong, and help me be there for my mama as she passes away. And before that, I would, pray, like, just help her. Don't let her be in pain, please. Don't let her suffer. Either please make her better or take her away. Even if I don't want you to, just do what you need to do to make her better. And that helped a lot. And when I would say that prayer about giving me strength, I swear to you, like, not exaggerating at all, I would be full-blown panic attack. And I don't know if you know what that feels like. It basically feels like you're not breathing good. Like you have to gasp for air. That's what it feels like. And then your heart's racing so fast and you're nervous. All those feelings just immediately subsided. So, yeah, I believe in God, and there's no questioning it at all now, for sure. And I did great through her funeral. And we raised the money within about 2 days, I think. 2.5 days. We had the GoFundMe. We raised over $1,200 on that. We had a car wash that Tiffany, Willow's mom, and one of my friends' moms, Brenda, we set up a car wash. And we had like 70-degree weather in January in Ohio. So that's pretty serious. We raised $1,152 at that car wash. And then, gathering money between the family and different things and, donations and fundraisers, we had enough for the down payment, and we was able to bury Mama. Still currently doing fundraisers and raising money just to help with those expenses, because it was about $12,000 by the end of it. And that's for a pretty decently cheap funeral. But, before we had a casket and anything, the funeral started at $4,000. That's without anything. And the casket, like a cheap one, was around $3,000. I mean, it was hard to find anything much cheaper. But this was a pretty expensive funeral home, so I was upset at my family for that too, for sending her to the most expensive funeral home. and then making us feel pressure to pay for it. But I don't want to like talk crap about my family right now, but that was the hardest part for me, was dealing with the funeral, planning a funeral, because I've never had to do that. Trying to come up with the money to pay for the funeral, trying not to get mad at my family because of things they were saying or doing. We're all good now and getting along and happy, but it was very hard, and I don't want to get dramatic and talk about that on here, but it took a lot out of me. That was a very stressful week, but I'm just glad that my mamaw's okay now, that she doesn't have to deal with this mess. Wow, I've been talking for over 20 some minutes, so there's not much else I can say about my life. We can talk about the rest later, because I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing this at this point. But if you did finish this video, thank you for watching. I know it's a long one, but thank you guys so much for all your support. There were so many subscribers who reached out to me, you know, and checked on me. I appreciate you all for caring about me and my family. Love you so much, seriously. If you're not a subscriber and you just happen to stumble on this video, maybe it's because you had something similar happen to you. If you want to be my very best friend, make sure you subscribe down below, or I think right here somewhere. I can be fancy and put it in here now. It's like a little circle with my picture in it. And then you can also follow me on all my social media. I always link that down below in the description bar. But yeah, comment, talk to me. I love to communicate with you guys. Maybe you had something like this happen in your life and you need to vent and talk about it. Comment down below. You know, I want us to be here and support each other, help each other out, and be friends, because I love you guys so much. And yeah, thanks for listening. I feel like I better go ahead and end this video. So, love ya!